Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into a new episode of Capitol View, a weekly webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com. Coming to you live every Monday around 2 o'clock, give or take, depending on the technical difficulties we encounter getting started. That tends to happen sometimes. But if you miss it live, you can watch the replay later in the day. I'm your host, Brad Locke, joined as always by Capitol Bureau Chief Bobby Harrison down there in Jackson. And Bobby, we've got another legislative session in the books, I guess, kind of.
That's right.
The regular session anyway is over. It ended late last week, and so kind of want to spend this episode mainly just kind of recapping some of the highs and lows, what got done, what didn't get done, and maybe what lies ahead. Possible special session. They got some unfinished business to do, Bobby. So first off, just talk a little bit about just how things ended there, Bobby. I know the very last thing they passed had to do with the Chickasaw consolidation, didn't it?
That was the last bill they passed. They did some stuff
Right.
after that. They did confirmations after that, but that was the last bill they passed. The Senate passed it. Session ended, Wednesday of last week, Brad? Is that right?
Wednesday or Thursday, I forget.
Yeah. I think it was Wednesday. But you said they were kind of finished. Kind of is a generous term. They definitely have to come back before July 1st when the new budget year begins, or there will not be appropriations for the Department of Transportation, the State Aid Road Program, and that's a program that provides state funds to help the counties with their major county roads. And then they didn't pass a budget for the Attorney General's office, so they got to come back and do those three things for sure, or it's going to create quite a bit of chaos and confusion, including the state won't be able to pull down literally hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds for road construction. So if you thought there was issues with road construction now not having enough money. Unless they come back before July 1st to pass a budget for Department of Transportation, there will really be issues with not having money to fix roads and bridges.
You know much better than I, Bobby. How unusual is it to have some of these agency budgets not in place at the end of a session?
It's not that unusual. It happens from time to time. A few years back when you had a Democratic House and a Republican Senate and a Republican governor, of course, now we have all three entities are Republican control, but back when two were Republican and one was Democrat, there was one session where they didn't pass any budget bills into regular session, so they had to come back and pass the entire budget before the new budget year began on July 1st. So this is an issue here where most everybody says, the budget bills died for a reason because of a conflict between the House and Senate leadership. But everybody's saying if it come mid-June or something and they still hadn't reached an agreement on those things that they were in conflict about, everybody's agreeing that they'll just pass. Philip Gunn, the House Speaker, said they can pass the budget for those three entities in half a day. So no one's at this point, no one's worrying that there's not going to be a budget bill for those three entities. It's just that they're going to come back in special session to do it.
Do you know when they might have a special session and how long it might last?
Well, just a little background. The budget for transportation, state aid road program, those two budget bills died because the House said they wanted to force the Senate to discuss ways to provide more money for transportation to deal with many groups, including the Mississippi Economic Council, say is a deteriorating transportation system. The House has sent some proposals over to the Senate to look at to try to provide more money to transportation, and the Senate didn't take those proposals up. So the Senate, the House leadership said, "By gosh, we're just not going to pass a budget for transportation and force y'all to the table to discuss those issues." So my guess is May, not before May or June, will the legislature be back in special session to deal with those budget bills.
You noted in your story, I think ran Sunday in the Journal, Bobby, that typically the second session after elections, the second term, tends to be a pretty productive one. The leaders, at least, Philip Gunn and Tate Reeves, thought it was a productive session, but obviously a couple of big goals not accomplished as far as the transportation funding. You mentioned that, and also the rewrite of the Mississippi Adequate Education Program, the Ed Build business, all of that, Bobby. So was it kind of a mixed bag maybe in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, and by any just I think anybody would have to agree by just sort of a just looking at number of bills passed. It was a lower number this year. Of course, a lot of people say that's a good thing. If the legislature is not in town, and some people think that's the state's safer. That's the old joke. When the legislature's in town, you need to worry about your money and family members and everything else. But that's just an old joke. But they didn't pass a lot of legislation. There was the thing everybody was talking about going into the session was the proposal that Philip Gunn in the House, the Speaker, and Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves introduced or brought forth to rewrite the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. And of course, that's the historic legislation from 1997 that is mechanism used to provide state funds to local school districts. And they were talking about rewriting it this session, and they never could reach a consensus. They never really introduced a bill to do that. They said they're going to do it in a special session, but when the session ended, it appeared they were still far away from agreeing on a proposal. And thus far, really no one has seen a bill yet on how they would do that rewrite. They had a group that from New Jersey, Ed Bill, that put forth some recommendations. They said they like most of the recommendations, but some of them they don't like. So we're still waiting to see how that would those recommendations would transfer into a bill, what school districts would lose money, which school districts would gain money. Those are all important issues to members, and so it's turning into a real complicated process. And there's a possibility if they reach an agreement, they could do the MAEP rewrite at the same time to do the budgets for MDOT, for the Transportation Department, the Attorney General's office, and whatnot. But I wouldn't hold my breath that that's going to happen, because it just appears right now they're still a long way from having an agreement with how to go forward with that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that's off the table for that special session that's likely coming, or if that's just going to have to be something they take up in 2018, Bobby. So, but kind of a slim chance, I guess you'd say.
I mean, at this point, would be a prediction. It's kind of, I think, they probably wouldn't say this, but I think they got into the rewrite of the formula, and it's kind of like what Donald Trump said about health care when he started work on that. He said, health care is complicated. Who knew? Well, the funding formula for to provide state funds to local school districts complicated too. And I think Gunn and Reeves and the other people working on that found that out when they began to sort of delve into the particulars of the issue.
One thing you also noted in your story, Bobby, there seemed to be coloring this session. I don't think we heard much, if at all, from the Demon Chipmunk, did we?
Just a couple of times. Matter of fact, one time when we heard from it was actually in the House. It was a fellow Republican that was mad at the Speaker, who had to request the bills be read for a while. So that was kind of unusual. But no, it was not as contentious a session as it was last year, when we went for days where the members of the minority Democratic Party were trying to slow down the process, primarily by requiring bills to be read before they were voted on. But we saw a little bit of that this session, but not nearly as much as we did in 2016. And part of that was just because it wasn't as much contentious legislation. If you remember, 2016 started with the House seeking, there was a tie in a legislative district in the 2015 elections, and the state law, a tie is supposed to be broken by drawing lots, as they say, which was seeing who had the shortest straw or the longest straw was the way they did it. And the Democrat won that drawing, but they still seated a Republican, and that created a lot of animosity to start the session, and it kind of went downhill from there. But this session didn't have anything like that, and and plus it just wasn't that much controversial legislation. I guess maybe the biggest bill passed, Brad, that had maybe the most impactful in many ways, is a bill that would finally stop the practice of politicians being able to spend their campaign finance funds on personal expenses. They passed that this session. That some people, many good government groups would argue that was a major piece of legislation. And while it's got some holes in it, most people agree that it's a lot better system than it was before the bill was passed.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the state lottery and the possibility of one. Of course, Philip Gunn, House Speaker, has been very vocal in his opposition to it. Governor Phil Bryant, over the past few months, has become more open to it, and now it does appear Gunn may actually consider it. Bobby, he's going to form a committee at least to study the issue. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to go anywhere, but I guess for proponents of the lottery, that's a step in the right direction for them, isn't it?
That's a huge step. And of course, when Gunn told the press about his decision to form this commission, he spent a lot of time still talking about the negative impacts of a lottery, and so you can tell he's still not for it, but he is taking this step to have a committee formed, and part of that is just probably the pressure being put on him. A lot of people are saying that of course there's a revenue shortfall. That might be the big budget story, Brad, that we did, a big legislative story we hadn't talked about yet, Brad, is the fact that the budget is a budget shortfall. Just about every agency suffered major cuts, around 10% or more for a lot. And to put it in perspective, in 2016, the legislature appropriated about $330 million more dollars than they did this session. So it was some big cuts. And so some people think the lottery will help sort of make up for the revenue shortfall. Gunn pointed out it'd take about 18 months to enact, and he argued that in Arkansas, the lottery is only netting $30 or $40 million over there, which is of course that's nothing to sneeze at, but it wouldn't make up for the budget hole that facing the Mississippi legislature. But some people, a lot of people argue it would help some. Attorney General Jim Hood, who many believes is going to be the Democratic nominee for governor, continuously makes that argument that the lottery would help with the budget revenue shortfall.
And this committee, Bobby, it would be chaired by Richard Bennett, who's the House Gaming chair. He'd lead the committee, and you're going to have both lawmakers and non-legislators as members.
Yeah, it'd probably be some people like from the State Gaming Commission and some people like that who are kind of in the industry who would have a better feel of how you would regulate the lottery, how you would put it into place. So it'd be people like that.
Did Philip Gunn give any kind of timeline about when that might be formed, when they might start talking about that?
He said soon. So I mean, I expect. Any day now, maybe this week or next week, that he'll announce who's on the committee, and they'll begin work soon after that, I guess.
All right. Well, Bobby, as we look back at this just completed session, any other big hits or misses that stood out to you as far as bills that passed or failed, or just maybe some goals that did or didn't get accomplished?
Well, we touched on the big ones. There was the budget shortfall, Ed bill, the attempt to rewrite the adequate education funding formula. Those were the big ones. But some other things that I think the leadership really were counting on to do this session that they thought with the Republicans having a supermajority in both chambers that they could do was, one, to eliminate civil service protection by taking state employees out from the personnel board. And surprisingly, that died in the Senate, and it passed the House. It took a big effort on part of the leadership to pass it, but it did pass the House. But then in the Senate Appropriations Committee, it died over there with several Republicans voting against it. And as you look at these Republicans who voted against it, there were people who had a state prison located in their district, and the state prison employs a lot of people, and those folks are covered by civil service protection. And the senator probably voted against it because he knew that his employees out of prison who voted in his district didn't want to be removed from civil service protection, and they were a big voting bloc. So that's probably the reason some of the senators voted against it. And then, of course, another one was, there was an effort to try to limit the attorney general's ability to file lawsuits on behalf of the state using private attorneys, and that actually died in a judiciary committee in the Senate, and that was kind of surprising. But there wasn't as many bills dealing with social issues as we've seen in the past in the legislature, where they're dealing with gay marriage, abortion. We didn't have a lot of those bills this year. They did pass a bill that prohibits cities from becoming sanctuary, so-called sanctuary cities in terms of
Right.
the immigration issue. But some people argue that really wasn't an issue in Mississippi to begin with. They were kind of voting on something that wasn't even an issue. So they did a lot of stuff like that.
All right. Well, good stuff as always, Bobby. And even though the session is over, the work is not yet done in Jackson. That includes Bobby's work. You can look for his stories on a daily basis in the Daily Journal or at djournal.com. And we'll be back here next Monday. Again, there's going to be plenty to talk about here with a lot of work still to be due, the possibility of a special session. So check with us about 2 p.m. here at djournal.com next Monday. You can follow Bobby on Twitter, by the way, at Bobby Harrison9. I'm on there as well, at Brad Locke. And that's it for this episode of Capitol View. Thank you all for tuning in. For Bobby Harrison, I'm
Brad, real quick, who do you like tonight?
Oh, who do I like tonight? Oh, in the basketball game. Yeah, let's talk basketball. Why not? I'm going to pull for the Zags.
Zags.
They're going to win. I'd like to see Mark Few win one. He's a good coach. Been doing it for a long time there. What about you?
Yeah, I go along with that. And of course, we, Mississippi State women. That was some game Friday night, and too bad yesterday.
Yeah, that was tough, but had a good run there for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. All right, so Bobby and I picked Gonzaga. It's probably not going to happen.
So go bet on North Carolina.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll see y'all next time. Thank you.